It's 7 in the morning, deep in the narrow alleys of a small neighborhood just south of downtown Bangkok. Chef Ga has already been at work since the middle of the night, preparing his signature dish, mu krab or crispy pork. To make his specialty, he roasts the meat for 4 hours, then treats it with a mixture of vinegar and salt. Then it's 3 more hours of alternating cooking and resting before his mu krab is ready to serve. Chef Ga might still be hours away from his first customers, but a few blocks away, the morning market is in full swing. Vendors make snacks and meals for kids on their way to school, workers on their way to long shifts at nearby factories and businesses, or the volunteers who provide services to the people here. But not everyone is off to work or class. At the end of the market, the alley ends at an old canal, and here, Yakult and his crew are getting ready for a different kind of afternoon. Here, in this neighborhood, each day brings new challenges, but new hope too. It's just another morning in Khlong Toei Slum, the most notorious neighborhood in all of Southeast Asia. This is Khlong Toei, and it might be the most unique morning market in all of Thailand. If the name sounds familiar, Khlong Toei is world famous for fresh produce and cooked food. One of the largest markets in Asia, frequented by chefs and tourists and tens of thousands of people every day. But this isn't the Khlong Toei market, this is the market at Khlong Toei, and it's not just different, it's an entire world apart. Here, at the center of a 900 square meter cluster, walled in on 3 sides by concrete and razor wire, chefs from every corner of Southeast Asia cook local specialties from their home regions, and a kind of fusion cuisine found only in this one place, a neighborhood so isolated even right downtown in Bangkok that the locals call it by the nickname of Tawip Khlong Toei, or the Khlong Toei continent. We'd been here in the continent for just long enough to walk through the first couple of market intersections, and we already found dishes we never even knew existed in the country. Things like this, num pang, a grilled baguette stuffed with sausage, pork belly, and a rich meat gravy. This is a Khmer dish, and the family that sells it here might be the only vendors making this dish anywhere in Thailand. And they've been selling it at this market since arriving from Battambang, Cambodia in the 1950s. And this, almost as hard to find, at least made in the authentic way. It's a Lao Isan Nam Prik made from dried river fish pounded with pickled eggplant and green chili. Other dishes here at the market come from eastern Thailand or the Malay border or southern Chinese provinces, but they're all here, in this single place, for one reason.
Everywhere we are, that side and over there is bordered by the customs port, the local Bangkok Chao Phraya River container port. And you can actually see the containers stacked right over the fence on the other side of the market where we just left. Like if you look that way, you can actually see I actually didn't realize that it was that close to the port, but it's literally just on the other side of the wall of where we just left.
The Bangkok port, known to everyone as the Khlong Toei port, was built in the early 1950s, and it's the reason why these houses were built. The reason why migrants arrived and the community grew, and it's also the reason why this neighborhood is so notorious. When the port opened, this village prospered, and when the port relocated, well, this was right at the center of what for a time became perhaps the most dangerous neighborhood in all of Asia. It's been 15 years since the daily shootings and drug fatalities faded from the local headlines. And today, though we were warned and did take some precautions, we can walk around with our cameras and navigate the alleys of this unique place. But as recently as the late 2000s, this was the kind of neighborhood that taxis and delivery drivers wouldn't enter. It's hard to call Khlong Toei a success story. It's still a place that's rife with poverty and still said to be run by the local triads. But that the neighborhood survives at all is something of a miracle. And that's something hard-earned by years of work from government and NGOs, intense toughness of the local people, and most of all, this place survives because of the local food and the unexpected attention of the culinary world. It's the years after World War II. The Siamese economy is booming, but much of the continent is still rebuilding. So the World Bank financed the construction of a container port to help export surplus Thai rice and vegetables. This would be one of the first modern container ports in Southeast Asia, and migrant workers flooded the capital looking for work. They came from across Thailand and the neighboring countries. Laborers looking for a job loading and unloading boats, or merchant seamen used to earning a living on the water. At the time, Bangkok's economy was growing faster than the population, so the government incentivized migration by allowing workers to settle on any state-owned open land. Just build, we'll deal with the legality later. And behind the new container port, there was plenty of empty land. In fact, this was back then miles from urban Bangkok, swampland and open fields. So on a plot adjacent to the port, the workers built a small shantytown of lean-to shacks and simple shelters. And as time went by, families started to join and permanent structures were built, and that is the beginning of Khlong Toei. But the story doesn't end there. In 1991, a new container port opened along the coast 60 miles to the south. The world-class Lam Chabang seaport would change Thailand and open up the country's manufacturing to the rest of the world. But for Khlong Toei residents, this was catastrophic. All of a sudden, the Khlong Toei port became nothing more than a regional loading dock. Around that same time, as parts of the port were disassembled, a chemical fire ripped through warehouses and into this neighborhood, destroying about a fifth of the houses and causing massive destruction. Now remember, most people here didn't actually own their land. They just lived in the places that they or their parents had built a generation earlier. So when the jobs went away and disaster struck, well, there wasn't much recourse. After all, legally, this place didn't even really exist. Now, the Thai government did try to help. They offered resettlement to the people who lived here, free housing in a new development 30 kilometers away on the outskirts of Bangkok. But for 40 years, the people of Khlong Toei only knew this community. They had their local slang and culture and didn't know life outside of work at the port. So within a few months, most who left had come back. Without work or money and with the neighborhood ravaged by fire and left in disrepair, Khlong Toei became a hotbed for organized crime. Locals formed gangs and stole to survive, and many people either sold drugs to earn money for food or became addicted themselves. These were the years when the walls went up around the outside of the district, and when Khlong Toei community became known as Khlong Toei Slum to the rest of Bangkok, and Khlong Toei Continent to those inside. It's Thursday morning, and Yakult wants to find out whether one of his roosters is ready for a showcase fight. Like a lot of people in Khlong Toei who grew up in the lost years of the 1990s, Yakult never had much chance for an education, and he's had to figure things out himself. For a while, the only recourse in the neighborhood was gangs and crime. But now he makes his living a different way. Early in the week, time passes slowly. Yakult and Pongtep and the guys spend the afternoons telling old stories and feeding the birds, but as the weekend fights get closer, it's time for training Each rooster analyzed for ability before the rest of Khlong Toei converges on this spot the following night. There's a lot to do on a Thursday here, but still, lunchtime is sacred and something eaten together as work comes to a stop. Today it's green curry made by a family member who happens to be a vendor at the local market. But lunchtime also means a quiet morning is now a social gathering. A half dozen more friends coming down with their own food to join in. Plates carried from the vendors lining the most remarkable alley in all of Khlong Toei, which ends right at Yakult's house. Khlong Toei is set up as a grid, 5 alleys from east to west, 11 from north to south, just 300 meters by 300 meters. And inside, the lanes are narrow and houses jumbled together into a tight cluster. But one of the alleys, right in the middle of the densest part of Khlong Toei, well, this has become kind of a neighborhood lunch hour food street. Here, when the clock hits noon, it's the sound of a dozen woks going all at once. This is a style of food called ahan tamsang, which literally means food made to order. It can be anything depending on the knowledge of the cook, the availability of the ingredients, and the tastes of the customers. In Khlong Toei, everything revolves around ahan tamsang, and the best cooks have their own crowds of loyal regulars. I feel guilty eating pork. This is my pad kapao mu next to the mu. I'm sorry, next time I get beef, I promise. Just when things looked bleakest for Khlong Toei, in the dark days of the early 2000s, it was one of these vendors, an ahan tamsang cook right here in the heart of the slum, who would, by some wild stroke of good luck and with the benefit of a big personality and an unforgettable nickname, trigger the rebirth of Khlong Toei.
I have a lot of chef, different area
Chef,
from
yeah, for
Italy and German, but someone talking, oh, superstar in German, but I talk to, I don't know. I don't know. Jamie Oliver too, I don't know him before. I talk to my friend. A lot of people tell me, why you don't know him? I stay in the slum area. I'm local person.
This is Chef Saiyuud Diwang, born and raised here in the slum to parents who dredged sand at the port, and someone who herself would be the first to admit was an unlikely candidate to lead the neighborhood's revival.
Long time ago, I stay together with my mom home, 8 people. But for me, I not study a lot. I to sell local food in front of my mom home, to sell the neighbor in our area. 100 people every day. No have holiday, no have special time, because no choice for people not study a lot. Not study too many people in the slum area. It's a hard work, no have holiday too.
For a few years, starting in the early 2000s, an Australian missionary working for an NGO tried to convince Saiyuud to open a cooking school. Anything to appeal to the tourists spending money everywhere in Bangkok, except in the Khlong Toei slum.
I'm missing the missionary, her name Angie Barker. She tell me, but she tell everyone before, Kun Poo, you can open the cooking school in front of your mom home. I say no, thank you, allow tea time. Because I talk to her, I know understand English language. Only yes, no, okay, thank you. Not easy for talking with everyone. But next time I say yes. I have a lot of staff in our area working with me. 12 people before COVID-19. After COVID-19, we have 8 staff working together with me. And now, I think the lucky for our team, short a time for working. Have a time for holiday and long weekend and day off, and money for the customer come to my class when we separate everything already, helping and support small business in our area. Now it's a lot.
While the cooking school did become a success, what really took off was when Chef Saiyuud released a cookbook in 2011, published with help from an NGO called Urban Neighbors of Hope. She wrote the cookbook under her nickname, Crab, or in Thai, Poo. Cooking with Poo. I mean, what a title. The book became an international sensation and one of the best-selling Thai cookbooks of all time.
Money a lot for the cookbook here, helping and support program cooking tour in Australia and UK. We use money a lot for the cooking tour with our team. But cooking tour outside, we go Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, and Canberra. In UK 8 years ago, London, Manchester.
How many people did you bring with you from this community to go to Australia, UK?
I think our team allow 5 to 7 people.
That's amazing.
Everyone so excited. We are so excited too. In UK, London, Manchester, Birmingham, and Northern Ireland. The money cooking tour outside is so proud with me. The money not come to me for donation together. คลองเตยมีอะไรน่าสนใจเยอะอย่างเป็นตอนนี้มีโรงเรียนฝึกอาชีพมีมูลนิธิต่างๆที่แบบเหมือนช่วยเด็กในชุมชนให้มีแบบการศึกษาที่ดีขึ้นคือสมัยก่อนก็คนจะมีการศึกษาน้อยคือติดยาเยอะแล้วก็ไม่ค่อยมีงานทำก็จะเดินอยู่ในชุมชนแต่ตอนนี้ทุกอย่างแบบเปลี่ยนไปในทางที่ดีอะค่ะ
In the years that followed Phu's success, while the reputation of Khlong Toei is still that of a grim and dangerous place, a different truth began to emerge inside the concrete walls. For the first time maybe ever, tourists were showing up for reasons other than just gawking at the destitution. In fact, many people who came were oblivious to the neighborhood's past altogether and just wanted to enroll in cooking school or check out the famous local food. And inside the community, bolstered by pride in the influx of cash and also by the emergence of the nearby Khlong Toei wet market, which became the biggest in the city and the first real source of widespread employment here since the opening of the new port, something unmistakable started to take root in the famous slum: hope.
This is so good. This is like top 5 thing we've ever eaten on this channel. Good. This is easily the best mook crab I've had in Bangkok, by far.
Like Phu, Chef Ga is known by a mononym, in his case meaning sheep. Chef Ga grew up in Khlong Toei, but like many of his generation, got out as soon as he could. His cooking career brought him to top places in Thailand and then overseas to Singapore and Hong Kong. But a couple years ago, he gave up his lucrative career and came back home, renting a small takeaway counter in the middle of one of the slum's ramshackle alleys, where for barely the cost of ingredients, he sells what might be some of the best food I've ever eaten in my entire life.
กับอีเชฟวางมือมา10 กว่าปีแล้วไม่ได้แตะต้องอีกเลยมาเปิดร้านอาหารนี่ให้คนพักผ่อนร่างกายไงคือมันอิ่มตัวแล้วอ่ะผมก็เลยพักผ่อนกลับไปอยู่บ้านเฉยๆแล้วก็เปิดร้านอย่างเงี้ยให้คนได้กินกันผมรู้สึกดีใจนะที่ทำอาหารให้คนของตัวเองได้กินของดีๆและในราคาที่จับต้องได้ไม่ต้องไปกินภัตตาคารแพงๆพอกินในนี้สามารถว่าหลักร้อยกินหลักสิบหลักนี้กินได้ผมอยากให้คืนกำไรกับลูกค้าคือให้ชุมชนเนี่ยได้กินของดีๆไม่ต้องไปกินภัตตาคารที่แพงๆกินอย่างเงี้ยมันจะได้หลากหลายอย่างหมูกรอบเนี่ยก็คือที่อื่นเขาขาย70-80ผมขายแค่50คือให้ได้กินกันไงต้นทุนผมไม่รู้ว่าต้นทุนเท่าไหร่กำไรผมไม่บวกเพราะผมว่าผมอยู่ตัวแล้วผมสามารถประคองตัวได้คือให้คนได้กินของดีๆกัน
Chef Gao wasn't the only one to come back to Khlong Toei. There's also the owner of the very first place where we ate our first meal after the morning market, who at 64 years old and following 30 years cooking in Bangkok's Chinatown, returned to her childhood home to help her daughter open a restaurant in front of the house her own parents once built back in the earliest days of the container port, a house that raised 3 generations in the same spot, and somewhere her own grandchildren can now grow up knowing hope and opportunity without, as she herself once did, needing to leave Khlong Toei to find it. Now, the first time Bangkok City tried to tear down Khlong Toei was pretty much right after it was built. The free-for-all approach to public housing ended with the passing of property laws in 1954, and by 1957, plans were made to turn this neighborhood into a market and new development. But citizens revolted. They'd been promised a new place to live, after all, and had come, in some cases, all the way from Myanmar or Cambodia to build their new lives here. So they blocked the bulldozers and petitioned the government and were allowed to stay, at least for a while. More efforts to tear it down failed again in the 60s and 70s and mostly succeeded in bonding the community together. And in 1983, the port negotiated with the residents for part of the land back in exchange for a 20-year contract guaranteeing the right for people to remain in their houses. But then came the 1991 fire, when a lot of residents had no choice but to leave. But still, they came back. And even when things were at their bleakest, the neighborhood persevered. But the biggest threat to Khlong Toei is the one they're facing today, and this, for the first time, is probably insurmountable. By 2018, Thailand had become one of the most prosperous and fastest-growing economies in Asia. Bangkok was no longer an industrial city as much as a cosmopolitan one, and builders raced to meet demand for high-end housing and gleaming new infrastructure. And Khlong Toei Slum sits on a parcel of land right next to the river, the kind of real estate that developers salivate over. There was a notice in December of 2019 that Khlong Toei would be demolished the following year. But then the pandemic happened and everything kind of stood still. Then 2021 passed and 2022, and each year a new notice that this would really be the year that would see the end of Khlong Toei. But 2023 might well be the year when the fight ends. The signs are unmistakable and the march of progress relentless, and it seems inevitable that before long, the whole city will look more like the Bangkok that exists all around the outside of the Khlong Toei continent. So maybe the end of the story has already been written. Maybe the wrecking balls come tomorrow and take with it the structures, the houses, and the markets and the businesses of Khlong Toei. But that brings us, finally, to why we decided to come here and to spend what turned into 3 full days inside the concrete walls. Because this is a place that deserves to have its story told and its memory preserved. So here it is. For the historical record, this is the Khlong Toei Slum.
คนที่ไม่เคยมาได้คิดว่าเป็นคลองเตยน่ากลัวมีคนติดยาเยอะมีอาชญากรรมแบบมาแล้วจะไม่ปลอดภัยอะไรอย่างนี้แต่จริงๆอยากให้เข้ามาสัมผัสไม่เป็นแบบนั้น
มันอยู่แบบพี่น้องไงซอยเนี่ยมันไม่มีอะไรวุ่นวายเขาอยู่กันแบบสงบไม่มีกินเหล้าไม่มีตีกันไม่มีอะไรกันอยู่ตรงนี้ถ้าเกิดอยู่ซอยอื่นป่านนี้ผมคงปิดไปอยู่เขาไปอยู่นู่นแล้วกลับต่างจังหวัดแล้วไปอยู่บ้านนอกแล้ว
มันเตยเด็กเตยนิสัยดีไม่มีอะไรเงี้ยเป็นดีใจดีพบกันเหมือนเพื่อนฝูงถ้าเล่นฝรั่งพบกันเป็นเพื่อนเงี้ย
ชอบกินกุ้งดองด้วยแล้วก็ปลาแซลมอนดอง
แต่ถ้าเราชอบนะไข่เจียว
คือส่วนมากคือชอบกินส้มตำไก่ย่างนี่แหละ
แถวนี้ก็มีส้มตำลาบน้ำตกแต่ต้องตอนเย็น
ข้าวเหนียวหมูปิ้งใช่
อาหารที่ชอบที่สุดก็จะเป็นพวกของย่างครับผมพวกลูกชิ้นแล้วก็พวกปลาหมึกย่างครับ
ไก่ชุบแป้งทอดหมูชุบแป้งทอดเนี้ย
หมูผัดกะเพราหมูเดี๋ยวชอบกินอะไรเดี๋ยวชอบกินอะไร
ไข่ดาว
want to stay here. A lot of people to stay here. You know, around 10 years ago when I listen, I cry. The government want to take everyone go to the condo or apartment. Oh, very sad. But now, 8 years already, 9 years already here.
มีท่าน้ำท่าเรือเขาจะทำเป็นคอนโดไปไหนก็ไกลอยากอยู่ที่นี่กันขนาดที่ย้ายไปอยู่ที่อื่นตั้ง10 ปีที่กลับมาอยู่ที่นี่เลยก็แหล่งทำกินอยู่ที่นี่มันง่ายไปที่อื่นแล้วมันลำบาก
อีกปีเป็นตึกหมดมันมีแล้วอย่างเงี้ยเป็นตึกแต่ไม้ไม่มีแล้วทำตึกก็ทำให้เราอยู่ฟรีอ๋อฟรีก็ดีไหมครับก็ดีอ่ะ
แต่อาหารนะเราคิดว่ามันมีตลอดมันไม่หายไปไหนหรอกเพราะว่าคนไทยชอบทำอาหารชอบค้าขายตรงนี้อยู่แล้วพี่ว่าไปตรงไหนถ้ามีโลเคชั่นให้เราอ่ะยังอยู่แน่นอนแต่แค่ไม่ได้อยู่ตรงจุดนี้แค่นั้นเอง
Cool neighborhood. Really happy we came here. Yeah, good food too.
Subscribe to the channel for more from OTR, and check the links below for our Patreon and to find us on Instagram and social media.
Name? Adam.